This is Royally Obsessed, a look behind the velvet curtain and commemorative plates at the lives of people whose obsessions fill their homes and social feeds.
This is my Diana room, it's my pride and joy.
There is a tendency to pick sides when it comes to modern royal watching.
So you camped out outside the Lindo wing for 1 month?
1 month. I would like to meet Camilla. She's the woman that saved the monarchy.
Oh, getting rather warm in here, isn't it?
Join me, Afua Hagan,
God save the king, and God save the queen, and God save the king.
as I take a look at all of the weird and wonderful ways people express their passions in Royally Obsessed. Tucked away on a farm in County Durham lives self-proclaimed monarchist and royal historian Anita. Anita's private royal museum resides in a converted cowshed and holds over 10,000 items. Although Anita does not consider herself a superfan, her passion is more focused on the institution itself.
I am a monarchist, and I don't just support our monarchy, I support monarchies around the world. And there's a very good reason for that, because I think monarchies represent freedom. The most stable nations in the world are monarchies. Japan is a monarchy, Sweden's a monarchy, Denmark's a monarchy. You know, these are the monarchies that I support. Yeah, a monarchist is completely different. I am not a superfan, and I actually get offended when people call us a superfan. I'm not a superfan. There are members of the royal family that don't actually like it, that it wouldn't turn out to see. But I'm not a superfan. I am a monarchist, and I am a royal historian, and I do love the history of it, and I do like following the present day, but I don't follow the present day as much as I follow the past. So I am a monarchist. I firmly believe in a monarchy as a form of government. That's my politics, if you like, because all of these countries around the world with monarchies that are the most stable nations in the world are also the most free. But I think the difference between a monarchist and a superfan is a superfan doesn't necessarily know the history. A superfan doesn't necessarily know the story. They know what they read in the press, but they don't read books. I have discovered during my research, and this is over 40 years of research on the monarchy, that history repeats itself. And it repeats itself probably in our own families, but our families aren't as well chronicled as the monarchy is. That's the one thing. You can look back, you can see everything. There is nothing unique in the history of the monarchy, but the media will sometimes say this is a unique occasion. Like when Diana died, when she was killed, and the outpouring of grief. That's what the country did when Prince Albert died, Queen Victoria's husband, and it's well chronicled. The difference is I would be a monarchist if I didn't have a single mug.
So, where did it all begin for Anita?
I can't remember thinking, well, I was interested in the Queen. I don't have a memory of when I wasn't interested in the Queen. So since I was a little girl, because of my mother, because she was a royalist. I never set out to get a collection the size of this. I didn't. The very first thing I got, which I suppose you could say started a collection, was in November 1976. It's my birthday in November, and for my birthday, the girls that I worked with, and I worked in the Fire Brigade control room, so it was a watch of us, and the other 5 girls on that watch bought me a double box of Silver Jubilee playing cards. I've still got them, they're still in the cellophane, and I was over the moon with that. I don't think I'd even thought about it, about having my own things, until that moment. And then, you know, as we moved into 1977, I mean, that was one of the best years of my whole life. I absolutely loved it.
And what does her family think about it?
They were born into it. They don't think it's anything different. In fact, I think they're blown away when the friends come and go, wow, look what your mum's got. And they go, oh yeah, it's always been there. Because I've always had it in the house, you know, like every room in the house, even the toilets. That's where I put Diana, actually. And I've got just a great interest in the history of all of these people, them as people, as well as what was happening in the country, as well as what was happening in the world. So, yeah, it's about 7,500 things that go back over 300 years. It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah, I'm quite willing to show it off. You know, it's the museum is just for me. It's a private museum. Well, actually, it was my husband that told us to get all the rubbish out of the house because she couldn't move in the end.
Anita's passions do not just apply to chronicling the history of royalty. She also has some strong opinions based on her insights throughout the years.
I would like to meet Camilla. She's the woman that saved the monarchy. Yeah, she said, I think in 100 years' time, when royal historians like myself, because I see myself as a royal historian, I've given talks on the history of the monarchy since 1981, and I research and research and research every day. There isn't a day in my life where I'm not reading a book, either from history or from the present day. But when royal historians look back in 100 years' time, they'll see what Camilla did. Camilla, the woman that saved the monarchy. She saved the monarchy because she saved the king. In 1981, he visited the homeless. Long before Diana came on the scene, he was visiting Cardboard City underneath the bridges in London. He suffered, and Camilla was the only one that saved him. She was the only one that could, and he can't live without her. Not a Diana fan. Not a Diana fan. I think the whole thing was a tragedy from start to finish. It was an absolute tragedy. There was a lot of misunderstandings, there was a lot of miscommunication. I'm not saying I'm not a Diana fan because the whole thing was a tragedy. She should never have died. No young mother with children should. If there has to be sides, which I don't think there should be, I think you can look at it all. I'm a Camilla fan because of how she's helped the king.
And her thoughts on Harry and Meghan?
I've read Spare. And I read Spare because I actually read a book that came out in 2014 about Harry. And when I read that, it was, you know, there was nobody like his brother. He loved his dad, he loved Camilla. And I thought, hold on, what went wrong in 9 years? So I read Spare. But that was a big mistake because, yeah, I needed to read it. And the more I read it, the more I thought, yeah, there's something not quite right. There's something, you know, this isn't right. I don't agree with him. I don't agree with what he's done, but I understand him more because he needs to be understood. He's not doing the right thing. He certainly isn't, but there's reasons why. You know, there's his mental health, there's his learning disability. Why doesn't no one pick up on that one? Meghan, I cannot figure out. I just cannot figure out. But what I will say, and I hope she watches, that she was certainly not the first mixed race royal. She wasn't even the second, because the second mixed race royal was Queen Victoria's grandmother, who was not white. She wasn't white. She was of Senegal descent. So I don't know what she's talking about. She clearly doesn't know her history, but neither does he. And it would be better. I often say in my talks, you know, the history of the monarchy, when I get questions from the audience about Harry, and I'll say, well, all I can say is if Harry knew his family's history half as well as I did, he wouldn't have written that book. I don't really know Meghan. I'm not really interested in Meghan. I don't know anything about her, but I feel like I know him. I feel like I've seen him born. I've seen him take his first steps. I've seen his first day at school. I've seen like him join the army. I feel like I know him. I was saddened by it because, you know, William and Kate and Harry and Meghan, the Fab Four, they could have ruled the world. They could have ruled the world. They could have done anything. They could have changed anything. And look what's happened. It was absolutely stupid. They were at the top of the tree already. They couldn't go any higher than what they were. What on earth has gone on? Yeah, I do think that the new technology that we've got these days makes it harder for the members of the royal family because you've got keyboard warriors. And actually, they're plain ignorant, some of these people. And ignorant in the proper sense of the word is that they don't know what they're talking about, basically. Now you can just sit there on the keyboard and you can spout rubbish. I'll tell you where I've got more things in my life than to go on to, onto forums and talk about things I know. And I've got the proof. And I can easily if I made a statement, I could prove it. Because I've got a book there, or I've got an original newspaper. In my newspaper collection goes back to 1810. So that's 1893, and that's almost 100 years later. That's 100 years inside that mug.
Anita's feelings on the digital discourse around the royals couldn't be clearer. But what of the online battlegrounds that seem to fill our social feeds? #NotMyKing, Meghan v Kate. This is Amanda Matter, aka Matter of Fact. Amanda's 1.2 million TikTok followers wait on her every word when it comes to everything royal. She has a unique view into the discourse around the digital warrior mindset, especially when it comes to the tribalism and anger she sees online.
As a history lover, I think the appeal of the royals is really in the way that they've kind of been this ever-present undercurrent, at least in Western history. And I find their stories so interesting to look at how they've impacted history, but also how they as people have operated. So people like, I don't know, Henry VIII and Queen Victoria, getting that peek behind the curtain is something that I know a lot of people look for with the royals today. And I've just found that it holds true in the past as well for me. I've grappled with this about whether to call myself a royal fan. I've had some articles call me a royalist, and that's the point where I'm like, okay, no, that's definitely not a label that I want to claim, because I'm not making my content out of loyalty or aiming to support the monarchy. But I mean, I am a fan of I guess if anything, I'm a fan of engaging with the royals and learning about the royals.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's decision to quit as working royals in 2020, as well as their subsequent Netflix documentary and Harry's memoir Spare, have caused much division amongst royal fans and the wider public. Amanda explains where the divisions lie.
When I started my TikTok, it was in the wake of Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah. So the reason I started it was just so that I would have a place to kind of dissect some of their talking points, some of the news coming out of that interview. And I found right away that people were so willing to engage with that conversation on lots and lots of different levels. While in the social media space, definitely, there's, I think, more of a skew towards being a fan and loving on the royals. I think in reality, people's attitudes towards them are much more mixed. Harry and Meghan coming into the family definitely made me start having these conversations first with myself and obviously then with the audience I was growing. That I think that for a lot of people is the departure point where if you were interested in the royals, you might have been able to go from looking at them and just taking the surface level in. But then when Harry and Meghan were on the scene and things were starting to play out in the media and the press, but also it seems within the palace itself, I think that was the point that it became clear, once there were almost two sides to the story, that we could have these deeper conversations, and we had a jumping off point to do that. There is a tendency to pick sides when it comes to modern royal watching, and it often does come down to Meghan versus Kate, but more broadly, it's the Prince and Princess of Wales versus the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And for me, that divide kind of boils down to your personal worldview. I think it's a litmus test almost, where you stand on the issue of Will and Kate versus Harry and Meghan says a lot about how you think about the world. We found in my comments, which I do moderate, I have to block and delete, and I have comment filters on because it's just crazy the amount of just vitriol that I get in my comments. But I've found that people who are more inclined to hate on Harry and Meghan, they're more traditionalists. They like the status quo. They like thinking about the royal family as this institution that's always been and is always going to continue in the same path. They don't like thinking about change, is what I've kind of observed, versus people who fall more on the Harry and Meghan side of things, or at least who are willing to listen to what Harry and Meghan have to say and think about it critically, I think are more interested in change, moving forward, changing things that need to be altered for whatever purposes, to make things more equitable or just whatever. I think if you're looking at Harry and Meghan and you're interested in the romance of their story, the fairy tale aspect of it, you're always going to consider yourself a fan of them. Thinking Harry and Meghan should have kept their mouths shut, stuck to tradition, I think that's going to say a lot about your broader views. So it's tough. It's really tough to say whether it's about Harry and Meghan as people or if it's about these bigger social issues that is causing people to be so divided. At least that's my opinion. Will and Kate are like two of those people that I used to feel one way about them, and now I've felt my own views on them shifting over time with more context being added, and that context happens to be, how Harry and Meghan got treated in the past few years. I have no problems with Will and Kate as people, I will say, but I do think that they have these very elevated forward-facing roles which carry a lot of weight. They're the Prince and Princess of Wales. Even if you just take Harry and Meghan out of the equation and it's no longer a question of who you like more, I think it is still useful to have that thought process about, okay, objectively, how are Will and Kate doing? How is the royal family on the whole doing? They're in decline. They're struggling, and I'm not placing blame on any one person, but there are so many people in the royal family right now that there's a lot of potential there that I just don't see they're not stepping up to the plate. And so when I'm looking to think critically, like not just criticize, but to think critically about the royals, that's sort of where I land. In the US, I think there's this attitude towards Charles that he's just the man who cheated on Princess Diana, and we hate him because of that. Like, I'm paraphrasing kind of, but that's like my mom being a big Princess Diana fan. That's how I was first introduced to Charles. And unfortunately, I think that's overshadowing a bit, despite like the decades that have passed, his, reign as king and Camilla's place as queen consort. So it's tough because I want the royal family to be doing interesting things, to be making the world a better place, to be changing with the times. I want them to succeed because I think the institution has some value still and could be lending itself to the future rather than just looking to the past. But for all that Charles has talked about wanting to transform the monarchy, I don't know. I still haven't seen that happen, and I don't know if it will happen. I don't know. Charles and Camilla, I haven't been wowed by them. I've kind of just been taking it as it comes, observing them. I don't know. Jury's still out, I think, on what impact Charles especially is going to be able to have as king.
Join me again as I meet the royal fan with over 13,000 pieces of memorabilia. Plus, we hear from the new breed of royal stans.